Well, TC and I are back in the house. You're probably thinking, what in the heck is she talking about back in the house? Well, I'm going to tell you. TC and I were out in the barn. It's midnight at Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary, and TC and I just got back from a little field trip to the barn where TC got to smell and see and feel experiences that he hasn't been exposed to before. He got to feel wind, he got to smell horses, and he got to smell barn smells, and he got to see all of the sights and sounds in the barn. And the horses got to meet him, and I did this week's Super Dwarf Sunday from the actual barn at Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary, and we just got back in the house. My husband Jim was the one that filmed this segment, and he is patient, but he's not patient enough to allow me to do more than one take. So this is going to be interesting. I hope it's fun for you. TC and I had a lot of fun doing it. He did not get nervous or scared or exhibit any defensive behavior at all. He was actually quite relaxed and seemed curious and interested in the environment. But we did the whole thing in just one take because my husband wouldn't let me repeat it. He was already tired of helping me after just one take. So have fun with it. Hi everyone, and welcome to Super Dwarf Sunday for August 1st, 2021. I am Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary, and this is Tau Seti from Reach Out Reptiles. We are joining you today from the actual barn here at Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Reason number one is TC has just been out of control this week. I think he's bored with the house and he's bored with the activities that we have for him in the house, and so I've decided that he needs to be exposed to more mental and physical stimulation. So we brought him to the barn this evening where he's being exposed to all sorts of new sights and sounds, those that he can hear, and especially smells. Now, if you've noticed, there's not really been any kind of fear reaction or defensive reaction from TC to the horses, and there hasn't been any fear reaction or startle reaction or anything from the horses in regards to TC being down here. And that's because, contrary to what many people believe, snakes and horses are not natural adversaries. In fact, in many areas of the world, snakes and horses co-evolved, and that means a few things. It means that horses are used to snakes being in the environments that they live in, and that's mainly grasslands like the prairies of the Americas or the savannas of Africa, or similar places where you would find both horses and snakes. Snakes are extremely good at rodent control and other pest control. Now, the horses, even if they don't consciously realize it, appreciate that because rodents are huge spreaders of disease and filth. And if the snakes are keeping that down, that's better for the horses. And the rodents tend to eat the horses' food, and I'm sure that the horses, if they realize that, would say thank you to the snakes for keeping the rodents from eating their grains and other foods. But there is another benefit to horses and snakes having co-evolved with one another. Horses have evolved some natural immunity to snake venom. Now, TC is not a venomous snake, and so in his case, if he were to bite Babby here, it's gonna hurt and it's probably gonna scare them both, but she's not gonna get sick from it, and she's certainly not gonna die. But even if a venomous snake bit Babby, she wouldn't die from that. That's a benefit to people, and I'm gonna tell you how. In the late 1890s, a French immunologist and physician decided that he could save lives of humans who were bitten by venomous snakes if he took the blood of horses who had been envenomated and he injected that into people. Now, I know by today's standards that sounds kind of crazy, but it actually did save lives. And all these years later, we aren't doing things that much different. So in many parts of the world, horses are used to make antivenom. Snakes are milked for their venom, and then that venom is injected into a horse. And depending on the part of the world where this is being done in, it could be just one venom being injected into a horse or up to 500 different venoms at once being injected into the horse or the horses. And then blood titers are drawn, and once a minimum amount of antibodies are present in the horse's blood. That blood is drawn up to 1.5% of the horse's blood volume, and it's filtered and it's purified to make people not allergic to it. And then it's used to make antivenom, and it saves lives all over the world. Then what happens is the snakes get to rest before they're milked for more venom. The horses get to rest before they're envenomated again. Their bodies have to be taxed by developing antibodies, and then their blood has to be drawn to process the antivenom, and that whole cycle starts again. One of the things that has changed since the late 1890s about producing antivenom, besides the fact that instead of injecting whole horse blood into people, we're now separating the plasma from the blood and filtering and purifying it. But when the horses are being injected with the snake venom, that venom is injected along with an adjuvant. And that's a type of drug that helps mitigate the effects of the sudden envenomation on the horses, and also helps the horses develop a higher number of antibodies than they would just with a normal envenomation. So I hope this has been an interesting Super Dwarf Sunday for you. I thought it was a good opportunity to give TC a little bit of added enrichment. And I thought it would be an opportunity to educate you about how snakes and horses have co-evolved with one another, not necessarily to be natural enemies. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this Super Dwarf Sunday. We will see you again next month for the first Sunday of September. I think this has been a great experience for Talsetti. It's been enriching. He's got to see things and smell things that he hasn't experienced before, and he's feeling what the wind feels like on his body because it's a little bit breezy tonight. The horses are just proving my point that they're not naturally afraid of snakes, and I do want to emphasize that when there are accidental encounters that result in snake bites to horses, it is because the snakes get startled, and that usually happens when the horses are walking around a field grazing and they accidentally step on a snake, or their nose accidentally hits the snake where it is resting. And then of course the snake gets startled and strikes out. When a horse is bitten by a venomous snake, there's localized pain and swelling at the bite area. The horse usually recovers without any kind of treatment, but I will say that if the horse is bitten on the face, which sometimes happens if they're bitten when they're grazing, that there can be swelling that impedes their ability to breathe. And of course, modern veterinary medicine can treat the horse so that they are able to breathe, and we can reduce the effects of that venom. In fact, one of the horses here at Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary, Summer, she was bitten by a rattlesnake a few years ago in the face, and she had swelling on one nostril, but she recovered just fine with no problems, and she's doing fine today. We do have rattlesnakes, garter snakes, and bull snakes here at Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary. And what do we do if we find them? We leave them alone and we don't do anything. I'm not worried at all about the horses and the snakes, because as I said, unless there is a sudden accidental encounter, there's not going to be a confrontation between them. Horses are not natural food for snakes, and they're not going to waste their energy that they could use on finding actual prey or finding shelter or thermoregulation or reproducing on biting a horse for no reason. And a horse has no reason to go after a snake. Horses are easily startled if they hear the snake rattling or hissing. And then of course, if there is that accidental encounter, they're both startled and the snake will strike. But because they've co-evolved together that way, it's not a mortal wound for the horse. It's not going to kill them. Well, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, everybody, please remember to always be kind and love your animals. This is where I found TC before we went to the barn, and so this is where I have returned TC to. The scale station outside of his enclosure. He wanted out earlier today. He climbed out onto the scale, and he's been sitting here ever since. So I returned him to this location. We're going to finish up this episode with some scenes of TC's activities throughout this week. Keep in mind, since last Super Dwarf Sunday, I fed him a couple of meals. He went through an ecdysis cycle. He shed about a week ago, and I fed him another meal, and he's rested for a few days. And then this week, he has emerged with tons of energy and he's just been very active all throughout the house. So I took a few seconds of video of some different spots where I found him, and I took a few photos, and I'm gonna leave you with that.